Okay.
There's a possibility I make slightly.
To flesh out, I always tell people, don't bring me something good. What can we do with that? Let's bring something we're really, we need to take to a new place. So give me some context about what you want to go over today, what you're bringing to me.
What we're working on is a closing story for a new keynote I'm working on leadership. And the context of the story is an experience that I had a few years ago with my first time going spelunking in a cave here in Northern California.
Okay. So it's the end of the keynote. And about how long is it? Do you know? Have you timed it out? Is it something that you can do in 5 minutes without any issue? Pretty much.
I believe 5 minutes. I've only used it once in an impromptu situation. It did not flow smoothly at all, but it was approximately 5 minutes.
Okay, well, let's not set the timer then. Let's let you go ahead and share the story, and then and I'll let you get all the way through it, and then I'll give you feedback. So whenever you're ready, and I'll assume that you're not performing it, that you're probably reading it at this point, but kind of read it sort of like you perform it. And if I give you feedback on delivery, I'll take into consideration that this isn't your normal circumstances.
Quick question around that. I just started writing it out. I have actually never written out my stories.
Yeah.
So this is really helpful in my working process. So right before we jumped on Zoom, I started writing. I've got a couple paragraphs written, but mostly it's just in my head. Would you prefer me to read what I have already or just tell it the way that it comes to me?
Okay, to answer your question, it doesn't matter to me because we're kind of looking at the words and we're kind of looking at how to put them together. As you're in the process of starting to write these stories out, it's a tough thing to do when you're not used to doing it and you're used to just telling about the story. And I might have said it in the session you saw me in, but once you start really coming up with cool lines, you're going to want them written down, at least that line, so that you can remember it and say it again, especially if there's a funny line. Where the words go matters. And so, but there's some people who find a happy balance in terms of they may never fully script it out, but they'll have an outline and they'll have those good lines plugged into the outline. And you can find what process. What I don't want you to do is mess up your entire process. And because you're so worried about remembering every word, it screws up the story when you go to do it live. I would rather you wing it more and hope to get in some of those lines than push yourself into a place you're not used to. So for the sake of today, just kind of, you can read what I don't care. You go and choose whatever makes you feel most comfortable. And I'll just give you feedback on what I hear.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'll start with what I wrote and then transition from there because I'm only about a third of the way through. I'm going to minimize my screen. I think you'll still be able to see me now.
Right. Okay. Yep.
All right, excellent. And yeah, by the way, this is a great new discipline for me who I've been speaking for years and always telling stories off the cuff, so to speak, or having it in my mind. Actually had taken the time to write it out is a new discipline that's really helping me to focus on my word choice.
Yeah. So is planning the story ahead of time. Many people, me included, I used to just start writing the story and hope that I got to where I wanted to go. But knowing the pieces of the story and how you want to put it together is also very helpful to do on the front end before you even start writing. But we can talk more about that if it comes into play. All right. Whenever you're ready, have fun.
All right. A few years ago, I went on a spelunking tour in a location called Moaning Caverns in Northern California. This was my first time ever going spelunking, and the caves were underground. As we went through the safety briefing before beginning the rappel, the guide explained to us how to use the equipment and that our 165-foot rappel would consist of the first 50 feet of the descent with our feet up against the cave walls, and the remaining 100 plus feet would be a free fall rappel where our feet aren't touching anything. There were 8 people in our group, and the guide was going to be the last person down. As we began the rappel in a single file line, everything went fine. It was fun, adventurous, and challenging. After descending past the cave walls and beginning the free fall portion of the rappel, the view was absolutely breathtaking. However, after about 20 feet into the free fall section, I noticed that my equipment was having problems with allowing me to descend in the way that it was supposed to. It became increasingly difficult to push the rope through the hitch, which is what allowed me to descend. As my forearms grew increasingly tired, it became apparent that I wouldn't be able to continue at the pace I was expecting to. And because we were in a single file line, my wife, who was about 20 feet above me, was approaching me more rapidly than she realized because she was focused on her rappel. And it was interesting because I saw some people that were parallel to me, were actually walking down the stairway, and they saw me rappelling and said, "Hey, it looks like you're going a little slower than everyone else in the group." Needless to say, I began to grow even more uncomfortable. I started calling up to my wife, letting her know to slow down so that her feet wouldn't hit my head during this rappel. And as my strength in my arms started to give out, I started to panic internally while doing my best externally to keep my calm, cool demeanor. Unfortunately, my strength started to give out, and I realized that I wasn't going to be able to get down without some help. And in my mind, being a man, being an individual that's very independent, I felt like I should be able to figure this out on my own. So I started to inspect my equipment and try to solve the problem, which I realized was that the rope was actually twisted in the hitch, which was preventing me from descending. Well, unfortunately, it became apparent that I could not fix the problem on my own. So I called down to some individuals who were at the bottom of the cave and asked them, "Hey, what can I do? I'm stuck here." And we started to troubleshoot as I was hanging about 50 feet or so in the air. Now, I cannot overstate how uncomfortable the situation was, because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what happens if the rope just gives out? What happens if I fall? Is this going to be the end of my life? And I literally am starting to go into a negative spiral with thinking about all the things that could happen and all the harm that could come to me. Fortunately, based on this conversation of yelling to the person at the ground, them giving me some instructions and trying to maneuver and still keep pace, knowing that there's people above me, I was able to get down and safely to the ground. As you can see on the slides here, I was able to make it there, and it was an experience that ended up unharmed. So the whole point in that story is that many times we rely on our own strength, our own knowledge, and our own expertise, and we try to figure things out on our own. And there's a lot of value to doing that. We want to become problem solvers. The challenge is, especially for us as professionals, it can be difficult to ask for help. And this experience really taught me the importance and the need to seek not only expertise, but when I'm stuck, if I can't figure it out, sure, I want to take the time to solve the problem as much as I can on my own, but make sure that I call out, find somebody who's been down the path that I'm going through, that can advise me, that can assist me, not only to shorten my journey, but to help me get unstuck. And in this situation, if I hadn't called out for help, if I hadn't swallowed my pride and ego and said, let me be vulnerable, let me ask for assistance, I never would have made it down safely to the bottom. And I don't even know if I would be here with you today. So my encouragement, ladies and gentlemen, and for all of us, as we leave this event, don't be afraid, don't be hesitant, and don't be so prideful that you can't ask someone else for help.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. That's a good story. And it's a dramatic story, which is what I liked. Hold on, let me make myself one more note. Okay. This is recording, so you're going to get a copy just to remind you, because I say a lot. Okay, and it won't necessarily be in order. Hold on. Okay, but in terms of a general assessment, this story is great. This story is so big and so dramatic that you do have the option of splitting it up. You could start your speech with this story, get to a place where you're stuck, and literally leave everybody hanging. And then you come back to it at the end of your speech. And that would be really cool. And you could tell part of it, and you don't even, as much of it as you want. And then you say, so I'm literally hanging there with my life flashing before my eyes. And in that moment, I learned the most valuable principle of leadership that I have ever learned. But we'll pick back up there in a moment. But let's, isn't that cool?
So
Well,
good.
that'd be cool. And then you
Yes.
go, so a little bit about me. And then you back up and you do whatever you want. And then when you go to the end, you could say, anyway, oh yes, where were we? Dangling from that rope on a cliff. Now, and you could even at that point, when you go back at the end, you could say, now let me back up and tell you exactly what happened earlier that day. So you can put more details in the end if you want, and only a few in the beginning, because I'm going to give you a lot of details that you can add that's going to make the story even more interesting. And you may choose to do it at the end where you kind of back up and say, so let's talk about what went on earlier. And then in the beginning, you just kind of go into it a little bit. But that would be a phenomenal way to what I call bookend your speech. Okay. Now, when in the beginning of the story, but for now, let's just pretend like it's a story that stands on its own. Let's just pretend like this is a story you're going to put on video and stick it on YouTube with a lesson. So we're going to work on it as if it's all to get told at one time for right now. You can break it up later. At the beginning of the story, I'd like some idea of where it's going, some sort of a lead-in statement. Often when you start a story, your audience is wondering, why is he telling me this story? Where am I going with this? So we could say, you could even, but I don't want you to give away the lesson, and I don't want you to give away the story either. So you could lead in with a simple statement, something like, sometimes we learn about leadership in the most unexpected places. Now we know you're talking about leadership and that this story, and our brains won't be trying to figure out what he's talking about. Okay. In the beginning, you're talking about spelunking. Most people will not most, many people will not know what that is and will be curious and wondering, oh, wait, was that where you do this? Oh, wait, or is that where you tip cows? No, that's, you can have some fun, but you need to take a minute to tell me what it is and why you would want to go do it. I think that would be interesting to know, and it would add more characters. You've decided to go spelunking. I know it's what everybody wakes up wanting to do. You've got some humor in there. You could go, anybody ever been spelunking? Anybody not even know? I know some of you are going, I don't even think that's legal in my state. You could have fun with the fact that people might not really know what that is, much less be able to spell it. So you've got room for humor in that I decided to go spelunking. I'd never been before. I thought it sounded cool. I thought, oh, how easy could it be? I've got this. Now, I would love, Ted, for you to set up the drama in the story. I'm going to tell you in a minute to develop your characters more. And you're the main character in the story. So set up from the very get-go, put in statements that show you're a manly man and you've got this. It's going to make it more interesting when you're hanging from the rope and have to ask for help. So you could say, I'd never been spelunking, but I watched a YouTube video. So I was ready for this. I got this. I'm going to conquer this, much like I would do anything else or something. I want you to kind of set up this, I got this. This is going to be great. I even talked my wife into going, and you could set up this. She was nervous, but I said, you got me, honey. With me behind you, I will make sure you make it. You could kind of set up this, because then it'll be funny if she actually does better at it than you, and your audience will love that. So in the beginning, give me a little bit more context around spelunking in general. And it's just such a funny word. And humor sells. Every laugh is currency. So, and by this time, your audience will already love you because you're near the end of the speech. So they will be much easier to make laugh. Or Ted, if you've broken it up, and this is at the beginning, this is an even even better way to warm up your audience and, even talk about that a little bit. So that kind of makes it valuable to have in the beginning when you're still trying to, get to know them a little bit. Okay. The characters could be developed a little bit more. And the main characters, I think, in this are you, your wife, and maybe the guide. The guide could make an interesting character. I didn't get to see him, so I would love to see him. What was he wearing? What did he look like? Is he buff? Is there this sense of, I got this, or is he like a little puny guy? Have some fun describing the characters in your story, because it's going to make us more invested in them. And the first character is you. So when I said earlier, set yourself up as this manly, I got this, I can do it kind of a guy. I'm going to go splunking. This is going to be great. I'm going to be the best spelunker that ever lived, you know. And the second character, if you choose to develop her, is your wife. There is so much good humor around husband and wives. And we all love that because we all understand being in some kind of a relationship. So you could work in, did she want to go? Maybe you're dragging her, kicking and screaming. Maybe she's loving this. Maybe there's some kind of competition between you. Explain to me, when you mentioned Lady was there, in my brain, I went, well, why didn't you tell me that earlier? I wanted to know earlier that she was with you, and kind of set that up. It's not a matter of finding the right examples. It's just that the more we can see and feel the characters, the more invested we're going to be in the story and the more we're going to like it. But you have an awesome opportunity to do that whole husband and wife thing, and husband thinks he knows it all and wife ends up winning. Your audience will eat that up. So, and if it's like, no, Kelly, that wasn't the way it happened at all, then fine, don't do it. I'm just giving you some options. Okay. I love that every story needs a conflict. You did a great job. You know what the conflict is. It's you getting stuck on that cliff and needing help. So that's very clear. I was very good that you set up, there's a problem, and you've set it up even better now if you tell me you're not the kind of guy who likes to ask for help. And you can even make a comment when you say that somewhere in the story. You could look at the audience and say, and I imagine there's a few of you in there too who are just like that, who would rather, it's just easier to do it than to go ask other people to help you do it. So you got an opportunity to relate to the audience, saying, anybody out there like me, and make a point about leadership and feeling like you have to do everything. And this isn't a good analogy, but I'll often look at it like, I would rather just do it. It'll take too long to tell somebody what to do, to teach them what to do, and then to go make sure they're doing it right. I'd rather just do it myself. So you could kind of play around, and you want that audience nodding, going, yeah, that's kind of how I am too. So you did a good job setting up a conflict of being on that cliff, and now you've got to ask for help. I would love, you told me a lot of facts about what was happening. And in some cases, you described how you felt, but I think you can do even more to actually take me to the scene, to raise the drama in it. And you do that by, first of all, be careful of ordinary words that don't have meaning anymore for us. Our brain becomes conditioned to words like amazing, awesome, it was scary, it was whatever. Whenever you're describing something like that, try to find a different, oh my gosh, I saw my life flashing before my eyes. Oh my God, I could feel my heart beating out of my chest. Find a couple of descriptive ways to say it other than it was scary. Because then I don't feel it as much as when you choose different words. And again, it's not about choosing right or wrong words. It's about choosing words that are more descriptive and not as ordinary. Now, I wasn't really sure what is happening when people are going past you. I was a little confused. I was like, what, is he going slow? And so clear that up for me. I'm all of a sudden I would almost, you think you're going at a good clip, think you're going to suddenly like people, I don't know. I was confused. Were they passing you? Were they, explain to me better what has happened on the side of that cliff. Now, I did understand it when you said, next thing you know, I'm tangled up and I'm dangled and I'm suspended. Now, I want to tell you something, and it's not really fair to even tell you this because you were reading it anyway, and it might not be the way you deliver it, but it does have to do with how you script the story. Write this story and tell this story the way you would tell your friends in a bar or the way you would tell everybody at a family reunion. A little bit of the writing, and we do it. We do it naturally, and that's why it's hard to break the habit. When we write to be read. And you're probably, when you weren't scripting this, when you were just telling us naturally on stage, you were probably delivering it in a very conversational way already. So make sure that in your new process, you write the way you talk, and you talk the way you talk. And so you don't say it as polished as you're saying it. You say, I'm not kidding, guys. I'm leaning up against this such and such. I'm dangling, and make it a little bit more conversational than polished. And an easy way to do that when you change your process is, as you're writing it, the story, write the way you talk and then practice saying the line. And as you're writing, that's what I do. I don't even script out my whole stories anymore. I just write them in like fragments and bullet points of an outline. And I'll stop and I'll just look at an empty chair and I'll try to say it the way I really feel like in real life I would say it. Like, no, you don't understand. I am not going to ask for help. So
Right.
you have a big, I put here, you're giving me facts. I would like more emotion. And a way to do that is to give me more of what you're thinking and to not make it polished thinking. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. And this is the underwear I had to choose for today. Or, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to die and I'm wearing these shorts, or whatever would naturally be in your brain when you're hanging there and your life is in the balance. I want you to just really tap into that. Oh my God, this is it. This is it. Thank God I didn't clean out the garage, or, or just something that would, when you can take us into the thoughts you're having and earlier in the story, give us those thoughts about how you were like, I got this. I am climbing that. I knew I was better. These people are all slower. Make it sound like you're macho dude, because then when you get caught, you've raised the stakes on the drama. And you got a drama moment when you're hanging there at 50 feet in the air and you're now, when you said I'm going in a negative spiral, I don't think that's what you would tell me in a conversation. I don't think if you're sitting across from each other at the kitchen table or at a, cookout, I don't think you're going to say, that's when I went into a negative spiral. You're going to say something like, oh my gosh, that's when I started to wig out.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I was freaking out.
Yes, exactly. And the point is, don't use the words I'm using. Use the words that you would really use in a conversation. And oftentimes, it kind of sounds funny, but when you're on the outside like me, looking at somebody's story, I can say, no, you would not say heretofore in conversation. Don't say it. There are just little places where it starts to become obvious and you can always, if you really don't know, tell the story to someone and say, I really want you to feel like I'm telling you this in our house. Are there any places where I'm using words that just don't connect? And somebody can help you. So more conversational. Now, I love it when you're hanging 50 feet in the air. I love the message you give. Most people cannot define the conflict in the lesson in the story. You did it beautifully. We know exactly what it was, and we know exactly what the lesson is. And I love that. I think there's a point in between. You went right from, I learned a lesson, to we need to not rely on our own strength. I want you to have one statement in between that says, that day, hanging on that cliff, I learned something very important about leadership. And I want you to tell me in a guttural way. I mean, don't make it super polished, that sometimes you don't know what you don't know, that sometimes you got to ask help. That day I learned. So make it really personal first, then take it to in leadership, we need to boom, boom, boom. So therefore in the story, I'm experiencing you learning the lesson before you're telling me what I need to learn by the lesson. It's a very slight difference, but it gives me the power to come to that conclusion in a non-threatening way. So, and I would love it if, now you've got I should have said it earlier, but bantering between you and your wife, if you could bring it back to the wife and she said this, and, if there's a running dialogue between you and your wife, then it might be cool to bring it out, or even in the story with, now I got to go. Now she's dragging me to a pole dancing class, or just something, something fun in terms of that. Now she's dragging me to something. One more thing I want you to say is, when you get to the lesson, then you could say say something like this. It would be a nice near the end of it type of a statement. One of these days, you may not ever go spelunking, but you're going to find yourself in a similar situation. You're going to find yourself where you don't realize how you got there, or faster than you saw coming, you're suddenly tangled up in your rope and you're dangling 50 feet off the ground or whatever. You're going to find yourself in a situation as a leader. And hopefully, as I remember this moment, so will you. And having the courage to reach out and ask for help in those moments not only will save you a lot of embarrassment, It just might one day save your life. See how cool that is? You're kind of taking it back. I would love that kind of it'll save you a lot of embarrassment, and who knows, it might even just save your life. Because you could raise the drama in that story, Ted, that you could have fallen. I mean, you could have, that was a big deal. And so there's a lot on the line, you know, as leaders. Be very careful not to add anything when you end that story. And then, man, you could, if it's the end of your speech, don't water it down. I mean, it's a very powerful, and it just might one day save your life. You know, thank you for your time today. My name is Ted, here to teach you the 4 principal pillars of leadership so that you can boom, boom, boom. It's nice to meet you. And then you're out. So the story is it's a great ender. Just don't water it down with a bunch of repetitive stuff at the end. I know I'm not looking at the whole speech, but since you told me it was at the end, I wanted to make sure. So there you go. It's a ton of stuff that you can do with it. It's a great story already. Just don't get buried up in the scripting that you script out. I would rather you tell it your way, like you're, you know, in the bar with a beer telling everybody, than for you to polish it up too much as if it's meant to be read. Make sense?
Yes, I am so glad you recorded this because I couldn't take notes fast enough.
I know. I knew it. I knew that would be the case, and it's helpful to kind of go back and slow down and pick it apart. But those are the pieces. That was an easy one because it was so well put together. So I will send you the recording, and you can go through it. And hey, I wish you all the best. It's a really great story.
Thank you so much, Kelly.